quite a few new. I'm not sure how much you all know about LETS, but we're a not-for-profit organisation in Kivi Harbour, and we're all about looking at community energy and looking at it locally and trying to help our community with resilience, with affordability, and helping them decarbonise. We've been going 2.5 years, and we're membership based. So I actually bought a few forms if anyone's interested in signing up. If you haven't been to one of these nights before, usually we have half an hour of a guest speaker, then another half an hour of questions, and then we follow by a supper so that you can all have a good chat about what we've talked about tonight. So our speaker really doesn't need much of an introduction. I think most people know Sam Kivi. And Sam is our local expert for renewable energy, and we're really lucky that he's been able to come talk to us tonight. Did a little bit of research about you. Sam was trained as a physicist, and he's been 15 years in the renewable energy industry. So he's been doing this stuff for quite a while. So I'll hand over to Sam, and he can lead you through this presentation he's got.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, everyone. Kia ora. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight on a cold night. I've thrown together some slides just to talk a little bit about, I think, my perspective, which I'll admit is a bit unique, on how we transition to renewable energy as quickly and as equitably as possible, and how that applies to us locally here in Littleton. I think there's challenges, but there's also a bunch of opportunities there as well. Yeah, so thank you, Wendy, and thanks to everyone else from the LETS crew for coming and joining in and making this happen. So I just want to take a little bit of time to go over how the energy system works that we have today that delivers power through the grid. This might be a bit repetitive for some of you, but I think it's important to have a good understanding of the bits and pieces that make up the jigsaw puzzle that gets power to us. So there's main sections. Obviously, we know that energy is generated mostly at large sites around the country. Hydro is the main one in New Zealand, but we have wind. Geothermal is increasingly in the makeup, and we have solar, but we also have gas and coal, and they all contribute to that generating electricity that we're using right now in this building. And it's transmitted from those mostly remote locations along the kind of the backbone of New Zealand through the national grid that's operated by Transpower. Those are the really big power pylons. And then it's distributed out from that backbone to the communities with the lines companies or the network companies. And Orion is our local network company. They own the poles and the wires, and they maintain them on our behalf. And they all charge a piece of the pie that ends up being your energy bill at the end of the month. So what does that makeup look like in your power bill? There's a fairly decent chunk of it is generation and distribution. Transmission is a little bit less, but it's really important to think that through when we're thinking about the energy that we buy from the grid versus the energy that we might be consuming from our own solar panels. We're getting to miss out on a good chunk of that cost when we're investing in our own solar panels and getting that energy effectively for free. So another really interesting part of our energy system is the way the market works, and this is often not well understood. And I'd just like to point this out because I think this is where some of the opportunity lies for us. And I wanted to show you this last 12 months. This is the monthly average of the real-time spot price of electricity on the market. It's not the price that we see or pay usually in our power bills. That's sort of hidden away by your retailer. And this is basically what your retailer is actually paying from any day or month. And it's actually changing every 30 minutes by a lot sometimes. And so if you look at the averages here, you can see, April was $300 a megawatt hour. That equates to 30 cents an hour. Sort of 30 cents a kilowatt hour is sort of 25, 30 cents is what we pay on our power bill usually. And so that's sort of what we would expect. But you see it goes way down here in June and July. That's down at sort of 10 cents. And it goes higher again, I guess. There might have been not much water in the lakes. There might have been a cold snap that's in the winter. And so it shot up again. And it has been known to go much higher than this in the past. And this is just only an average. But you can see it drops away again through October, right through to quite recently. It was really, really cheap. And I think that's the part that I want to impart is every day you can look up this information if you're a bit of an energy nerd like me and see what is happening every day on that real-time market and understand how cheap energy is and why that might be. So often it's because the lakes are full. When the lakes are full, we're actually kind of dumping water and we just have a surplus of renewable energy. That's when all the coal plants are turned off, the gas plants are turned off, and that's when we hit those really renewable, 98% renewable figures for the makeup of the energy that we generate in New Zealand. And so that sort of comes to now, how is the price set for all that generation? There's hydro, wind, geothermal, there's a whole mix here. And this is a really handy graph that's available for free online that you can look up anytime. And this little graph to the side is showing you every 30 minutes, what is the stack up of generation that's being delivered into the grid to supply us. And so it's always showing you a slightly different mix each half hour of those little bars. You can see there's a lot of geothermal is the bright color at the bottom. The purple is the hydro. You can see just at a glance how big an influence hydro is on our energy system. And you can see the prices there. I think you've got some of the prices that are bid in there. They're obviously all different. And notably the gas price is $1.74. So that's a very high price. And that matters because the way everyone is rewarded for their generation, whether they're wind, solar, hydro, or coal or gas, is that there's kind of a cup every half an hour that's filled up by the cheapest first. So hydro, wind, solar, they go into the bottom of the cup. And if that meets the demand that we forecast for the next 30 minutes, then that's quite cheap. But if there's more demand, or there's not enough hydro or wind or solar to fill the cup, we need to top that up. And that's when the coal plants get turned on and the gas plants get powered up in anticipation of that shortfall. And that's what everyone is paid. Everyone is paid what the highest price costs. So whenever we have a shortfall, what backs it up is coal and gas. And that's why we get high energy prices when we're out of lake water, for example, or there's a really cold snap. And I just wanted to show a snapshot of our local network, Orion's network, over two different seasons, and to show you sort of what's going on in Orion's head when they're managing things. The black line at the top is showing about 600 something megawatts of total capacity in the network supplying the Orion network. That's what it's built to. That's all the transformers, that's all the lines that are connecting everything. That's that maximum capacity, kind of as fast as your car could go, if you like. And then the lines obviously are showing what the demand from us from our community, from our homes, from the businesses over the hours of the day. And you can see it dips down here in winter through the night when no one's using much electricity. But then as people start to get up in the morning, that's all of us contributing to that peak. Then it dies away again. We're not making toast, we're not boiling our kettle, probably not running our hot water cylinders, but you can see it dips down again in the middle of the day and then rises again when we all sort of get home and run the bath and cook dinner. And then in summer, it's sort of a bit similar, but you don't have those big peaks. And so I think if you look at that, the one takeaway I want you to have is how big that network is and how they've built it for sort of the worst case. They've built that network for the worst day on the coldest day to make sure we will have security of supply. There's a lot of work that's gone into that, but that's the basic solution. It's just to build way more than you need for most of the time. And you can imagine through the summer, every day is like this, and there's all this unused capacity at the top. Any questions?
So just going back to the spot price, historically up until the 90s, was that set by the average of all those generation types rather than the most expensive?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to. Yeah, that's a before my time historical question. I don't know if anyone else knows the answer in the room. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know specifically how it was set. I believe it was set up that way from the beginning, but I don't know the answer. Sorry, Tony. Yeah. So just coming back to utilization, this is one of my favorite bugbears or issues. Is that huge capacity that we build in our networks to meet the worst day of the year, that has an impact. That has an impact on how much we will pay every day, because we all have to pay for the investment in those assets, even though we only use part of them sometimes. And that's kind of true for generators. So you might spend $100 million on a wind farm, but the actual production of that wind farm is actually quite low, could be 30 or 40%. The solar production from the rooftop solar in our homes is actually pretty low, generally speaking. It's about 15%. So think about the investment in that asset, and then only 15% of it is really sort of its potential is utilized, obviously, because the sun only shines a day, unfortunately. But geothermal's got really good utilization. That's 90% of the time it's sort of up and running at its full capacity. And National Grid, the pylons that transport all the energy, they're sort of around 30-40% utilization. So they're built, massively overbuilt for that worst day in order to make sure the lights turn on when we need them to. And same with the lights currents, as I demonstrated. So therein lies an opportunity.
I thought you were going to continue to talk about utilization. So
Sure.
I have a question.
I'll definitely be coming back to it.
Okay, because I thought you were going to say more, because it seems to imply that we have to increase our utilization to maximize all that investment. But not always is the case, right?
100%. That's sort of where I'm going is,
Okay.
if we had hours of the day, months of the year where there's way more renewables available to us, but we're not getting that down the pipeline to us, and we're not using the assets that deliver them, then that's all an additional burden on us in our bill. And that's kind of a fixed cost in our power bill. Whether you use it or not, you've got to pay that sort of fixed cost of the asset. It's all a little bit dry and technical, but I just think that's really important to sort of to show where the opportunities are. So as we go into this renewable energy transition, we're phasing out coal and gas, hopefully, And we're building more really variable, volatile renewables like wind and solar that we can't really control. We can't turn them on when we want to. And that means volatility, both in the supply and in the price of electricity that we have. So there's an opportunity there to reduce that volatility if we can change the way we use energy. Australia is a good example that we can look to. So Australia, we all know, has this great story of really subsidizing a lot of solar, producing enormous amounts of energy in the middle of the day. And that's kind of the conundrum with solar is if we all built lots of solar on our roofs here to this extent, we would quickly face challenges, problems in the grid. You can see this article is recognizing back in 2019 that this was causing a problem in the grid, even though it was apparently mandatory in Perth to install solar on new homes. So there's problems and challenges in this overbuilding of certain renewables, but there's some opportunities there as well. In Australia, that renewable energy, if you sort of add it all up, it's quite an extraordinary amount of energy that is basically wasted or thrown away and not utilized. That there's a conversation that I remember having with a wind farm developer in Australia, and they told me when they are developing the business plan for their wind farm, they completely ignore any revenue from the middle of the day for their wind farm because there's so much solar generation in Australia that the prices go negative. We don't have that in our market in New Zealand, but imagine being charged for generating electricity and putting it into the grid. And the reason that happens in Australia is a disincentive for threatening the grid, because too much energy going to the grid does cause a lot of problems if it's all combined at the one time. So if we're talking about waste, I like to think that we know how to deal with waste in a lot of industries, and we do a pretty good job. And I think everyone here could probably agree that whatever we can do to make use of something, a waste stream, or even just in our homes, if we're composting our green waste. But any industry, I think, if it's trying to produce something of value, if they have a waste byproduct, it makes a lot of sense to try and turn that into something of value too. And the opportunity there is that additional value from that waste stream, that can help improve the economics of building or growing that product so that it's cheaper for everybody. And orchards are probably a good example of that, where you have certain grades go to the supermarket and they get a certain price. A different grade, maybe they're a bit bruised, but they go to juice. And then the really bruised ones, they kind of have a low value and they might end up in some other application. So this mentality of using the waste and improving the overall economics of your operation is a really good one. Cheesemakers, they used to find this whey protein was a problem, a hassle to get rid of. And I've read about cheesemakers who have actually found that the waste is actually now more valuable than the cheese. So it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. But it just makes sense. They were dumping it or having, there's all sorts of environmental problems, but they found a market for it. So energy is an industry, by and large, I think, that throws away and wastes that surplus. That's something that I've identified and tried to focus on in my work. Because if we want more renewables and cheaper power, we've got to make use of the waste. We've got to find a market for it. We have to think about mass producing electrons as efficiently as possible so that we can deliver renewable energy to everyone in the grid, not just those who have solar and batteries and can afford those wonderful things for access to cheap energy, but for everybody to realize benefits of renewable energy. So demand response is one of those other aspects that is really important in managing our grid. And that comes back to that diagram that I was showing of the Orion network with that peak of power coming up and nearly getting to the top of the maximum limit. And one thing that Orion does and has done for years, and all the networks around New Zealand do this, is they actually send signals out down the wires called ripple control, and it turns off your hot water cylinder if you're subscribed to that program. And that's really effective. That allows them to send that signal in that winter morning, because you don't need your hot water cylinder running at the moment that everyone else is cooking dinner or boiling the kettle. And so that's one example of demand response. That's quite large scale. I suppose that might be in the tens of megawatts, perhaps. It just takes the edge off and gives them some breathing room in the grid. But there's a bunch of other applications of demand response. Large industrial loads are probably the biggest one that's recently sort of developed in New Zealand has been the Tiwai Point smelter. That has been contracted to turn off, you get how many, 100, 200 megawatts potentially. When we know there's a dry winter coming, that's an agreement where they sort of flex down, they consume less energy, and that frees up more energy for the rest of the country when times are tough. And so my company that I founded in 2018, we're aiming to do something similar with compute in that space. But I think this applies to communities as well. Obviously, our hot water, I think, is mostly participating in that already. But we can start thinking about building our own network here. Cars, buildings, using batteries, using local community data centers, getting them all to work in concert. So knowing when to turn off, turning off, but turning back on again. That's an opportunity for Littleton to play its part, and for every community, with some pretty simple tools that we have access to today.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
It's possible to do today. So what is the reason why it's not happening yet?
Yeah, I think there's a smart home revolution that's coming, but it seems to always be coming. I spent a bit of time on developing a product that monitored everything in your home, and it could turn off those critical loads and turn them back on again and tell you all about it. And I think one of the challenges is interoperability. So we've all got different dishwashers, we've all got different hot water cylinders, we've all got different cars, we've all got different spa pools, and they all have some manufacturer with their own proprietary sort of code of how to maybe control it. Maybe it's not even controllable. So that's a real challenge to roll it out en masse. But I think that there are some sweet spots that we could leverage as a community. There's cheap access to energy monitoring tools and energy control tools that we could feasibly build as an open source model for anyone in Littleton that wanted to participate in that. And I think it's tricky to say where the value lies for each participant in that. So why would you do this? But I think that's something that we can demonstrate as a community, and then, for example, go and talk to Orion about, is this valuable to you? And I think that will be. They're really interested in flexibility, increasing that takedown of that peak. That's a real opportunity for us to bring a solution to the likes of Orion. Yeah. So this is some advice that I do give to people who have solar. Is one of the simplest things that you can do to make the most of the solar that you have is to put a little timer on your hot water cylinder. You need an electrician to do it, but you can just have it turn on at say 10 or 11, depending on when you get solar generation happening in your home, and turning it off again, say at 3 p.m. So most of the heating is provided by solar free from the sun and not running at an awkward time in the evening for the grid. So I like to sort of just imagine, hey, what if we got 200 homes in Littleton to sign up to some program that lets develop some offers where we have 3 kilowatts. That's about what a hot water cylinder is. That's about what a EV charger is at home, or a spa pool. And we could say to Orion, hey, we can flex off 600 kilowatts every evening if that was helpful to you. How much would that contribute to your network management? And then how much would that help Littleton, the residents of Littleton? And then can we take that further to other suburbs? So the opportunity, batteries are a real tool here. If you install a battery, it can kind of do all of these things already. If you charge up a battery, it can kind of deliver energy at those critical times. But batteries are expensive. At the moment, they can range in price depending on the size, but they're definitely a large expense, and they do add to the payback time of your whole home energy system. You need to have capital to install these. There's loans available. That's really helpful from banks, but you need to have a mortgage in order to benefit from that. So that kind of selects out a good portion of society who can't participate in that at the moment. Battery prices are coming down, and repurposed EV batteries are something that's just starting to come in. I'm embarking on a bit of a project myself where I'm taking a vehicle that's been written off that has a really large battery inside, but the car's kind of worthless, can't be fixed or repaired. But if you take out that battery, and there's some smart people who have worked out how to talk to the battery and how to plug it into your home, you can get really, really good value in home energy storage. And I'm quite excited to sort of see that project through myself, understand the ins and outs, and then potentially use the same model for delivering community energy batteries made out of waste product, crashed car. So the other thing that's sort of come in recently is that Orion is starting to pay you if you can deliver energy into the grid at those crucial times in the mornings and in the evenings. It's going to go through your retailer, and so it's going to rely on the retailer contributing that benefit back to you. So it might be up to us to hold our retailers to account on that. But I think that's another place where LETs can kind of provide value, is keeping tabs on that, advocating for that, and giving advice on that. So if you have a battery in your home and you want to set it to deliver energy into the grid at those critical times to help the community, to help the grid manage loads, you might get rewarded for that. Yeah. So if exporting energy at the right time earns more money, it stands to reason that flexibility, so turning off something, is going to save you more money, or you'll be penalized if you don't. So that's why we tend to see in some retail pricings that energy costs more at certain times of the day, time of use based charging. But anything flexible can participate in that, as we've covered hot water cylinders, cars, and even computers. So it comes to what I do for a day job. I founded a company called GridShare in 2018, and the idea was to recognize this wasted energy, to recognize the poor utilization of our network assets, and that there's an opportunity to basically export our renewable energy just in the hours that it makes sense and the months of the year that it makes sense. using compute. And I'm not going to delve right into into exactly how this works. That's probably another workshop and another session. But you can think of computing these days inside data centers as actually just a box that electricity goes in and money comes out. That's how data center operators see it. And within data centers, there's a whole spread of value in there, kind of like in a supermarket. There's some goods that are really high value and they don't last long on the shelf. You need to move them on. And some things can sit on the shelf, like rice, for a really long time, and it's relatively low value. Computing is like that. So what we've done is pick out computing that is really low value, doesn't need to be done in a hurry, but nonetheless fills up data center compute and energy demand around the world. And we're trying to move that to renewable energy locations. So we've built a 2 megawatt site down at a hydro dam in Monterey. And so when New Zealand's renewable resources are really pumping, the energy price is really low, like zero, quite often. And that's no good for a generator. They want to earn more than zero. Don't you want to earn more? Who's got solar here? Yeah, you'd be annoyed if you would, if like half the time you were offered zero. And so what we're trying to do is solve two problems. One, the generator wants to earn more money from its full lakes. But the other is the energy system needs more utilization and more flexibility in order to transition to renewables. So there's these two benefits here by having a data center running at the right time, but turning off really rapidly. This can turn off in a couple of seconds, and actually you can turn off almost instantly to stabilize the grid. We contract to Transpower for that grid stabilization processes. That means when there's a fault, maybe a couple of times a year, it'll just turn off, and that'll help save the grid from falling over and stumbling. But most of the time it's just cycling up when energy is cheap and renewable, and turning off in the winter. We've turned this off 2 or 3 months at a time sometimes, and it's because we're picking compute that's appropriate for. The other thing it does is generate heat. We're not reusing that heat here yet, but that's another aspect for the community use of data centers that we'll get to. Gridless is another company which I find quite inspiring. They are basically enabling solar and renewable energy to be brought out to remote African communities by bringing little data centers in these boxes. And those are that's the main customer for the renewable energy. And because it's flexible and you can put it in a box and put it anywhere on the planet, that is the economic model by which you can install these remote solar arrays. And there's plenty of energy left over for the community to electrify, to develop batteries to give them lighting at night. There's a whole lot of health and well-being benefits for the community if they get access to light, to electricity for lighting. So for Littleton, you saw those containers. They're pretty big. They're about 0.5 megawatt each. But I think there's an opportunity in some places in Littleton for us to consider that sort of utilization of our renewable energy. So we could start with solar on a community building. We'll touch on what Lex is doing there. We can add a battery to trade on the grid to provide backup, to provide services to Orion. But we can also add compute. If we've got a big enough system, we'll have more energy than we know what to do with. The batteries often fill up really quickly. So that's another option that we have as a community to utilize the renewable energy, to monetize it and keep the value for ourselves. Sending energy into the grid is good. That's kind of helping someone else another company, that might be generating power or having a lack of power. If we can generate it here and choose whether it goes to the grid or to our own data center that's earning revenue for us and generating heat, there's a real multiple of benefits that can potentially arise.
Use the access to mine for Bitcoin.
That's what we do.
Oh, I was joking.
No,
Oh, okay.
all right. Thank you for raising it. In all seriousness, I've looked at every kind of compute, and there's a lot of really applicable compute, but it actually happens to be the most flexible and suitable for this task. It's been a really surprising paradox to discover that that's how we bring renewable energy along, is finding those kinds of flexible compute. Yeah. So,
Do you worry that there's a bit of dissonance there in terms of values and things like that? And sorry, the only association I have with data centers is like AI and and stuff. So
Yep.
like, is that?
Yep.
That an issue?
here's the thing: we do need to make a decision as a community about what is bad and what is good. What I've learned in my journey, because I didn't start out trying to be a data center operator. I started out knowing I needed something flexible that could be located anywhere, that could monetize energy just in the moments that we had it, but turn off. And there's not many other applications to this that really exist that are available today. There's often hydrogen is proposed, but those require enormous amounts of capital investment. Ours is very capital light and very, very quick. And so what I would say to the data center question is, there's a whole lot of things that are happening in data centers right now that we all participate in through some degree, whether we're aware of it or not. So when we spool up Netflix, that's a coal-powered data center in Sydney, turning on and streaming something to us. So we will have to really evaluate what down the chain and educate ourselves. What are the services that we're asking out of the data center? And so what I'm doing is I'm picking out of the data center what is the appropriate task, because there's a whole array that happen inside a data center. What is the appropriate services that fit the technical and time requirements that meet that threshold? And I've done research into this in the time since I started the company, and I'm really comfortable and happy to talk to that because there's a really surprising story, is what I would say to that once you start looking into it. Yeah. So coming back to heat, using heat from data centers to provide value to the community, I think is something really interesting as well. It's not a new out there concept. It's been done around the world quite a lot. The Olympic swimming pool in Paris, that's heated by a data center. This is happening more and more around the world, where horticulture is starting to use waste data center heat to heat their glass houses instead of coal and gas. So I actually see our data center model as a real decarbonization opportunity for the horticulture sector in New Zealand. So just imagine if we had the rec centre here preheated through the small hours of the morning, preheated with data center heat that is generating a revenue for us using renewable energy at night. And they don't need to come in at 9:30 and turn on 30 kilowatts of heating to make a comfortable yoga session. Because that's the type of thing that happens right now that adds to that real peak of demand in our grid. There's ways we can smooth things out if we look at it carefully. So compute and batteries, I think they complement each other really well. Doesn't have to be one or the other. It depends on the application. There's a whole bunch of different pros and cons between them. I'm really excited to see battery prices coming down. It's going to make them more accessible to more people and more communities. But batteries fill up, and once they're full, if you've still got renewable energy, again, it goes to waste. So what stays in Littleton? The power stays in Littleton. If we can use the economics of these flexible loads and load shifting to bring more renewable energy to Littleton, then we keep the value that is kind of falling down every day on our roofs and wasted in a lot of cases. We keep the heat for use in our community, the revenue, and the knowledge to do this and share this with more people. Because I think the model that Let's is developing for expanding the way we engage with energy is one that we can share with lots of other communities once we've got the model up and running. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Let's projects that we have underway. This is the portal building, which is just next to the swimming pool. You can see in the top right corner there. And we've got an agreement with Project Littleton, who leased the building, for Let's to put solar panels on the site and to share the profit that generates when it's sold back to the grid with Project Littleton, between Let's and Project Littleton. And I think this is a really important model. I think this empowers not-for-profits and community groups to earn a revenue to keep their operations going, to maybe pay their overheads and allow them to focus more on their mission and less on fundraising. And I think the ongoing revenue from sites like this can help the community group fund more projects. So for Project Littleton, that would be building more sites like this until we have a really well-balanced, well-utilised, functioning renewable energy system in Littleton. There's another project a little bit bigger, just in the rec centre behind us here. This is a really exciting one, but it's a bit more expensive, so we're taking that to a sort of a phase 2. That would be putting solar panels on several roof spaces and batteries. And those batteries would form a resilience hub for the emergency hub that's based out of there. So if there's an event where we lose power, there's another earthquake, we will have a place for the community to come and charge their phones and reconnect and connect with the outside world. It won't be able to run all sorts of things, but it'll be a place where the lights will be on and there'll be a communication hub as well. So those are the sorts of projects that we're looking to roll out in Littleton with Let's. And there's a nice picture of this is our community. I love the farmers market is kind of where everyone comes together, and I see the longevity of this farmers market as a wonderful kind of testament to Littleton's community spirit. And yeah, I'd like to invite you, if you're not already a member, to join us and to get involved in these projects. My journey with Let's started in that community garden, looking over at that portal building and thinking, what if there were solar panels on there, and then saying that out loud. And that connected me with everyone else wanting to start Let's. Yeah, so we know how to self-organize. We know how to do this in Littleton. I'd love for you to come and join us and help us with these projects. Cool. Thank you. Any questions?
I have, but let me ask these ladies here, and gentlemen, do you guys have any questions online? Go, Jillian. We can hear you.
No, I don't. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. The question I have for you is about this utilization or underutilization. We know that the grid is not the same everywhere, that the capacity of the local substations is not the same. And there may be some upgrades that are needed for local networks to really absorb that. What's your take in how we can also have like a win-win situation to build that up at the same time as we're really taking the benefits of community solar projects and individual folks that have solar in a way that is not more expensive and kind of prevents the network to do it because they, of course, they don't want to do something that it may be too expensive and they may not see the benefits because it's decentralized energy. So what are your thoughts
Yeah,
with that?
that's a really good question. It's actually something I decided not to include just for length. But it's a real problem, and I guess it's an opportunity to flesh out what's happening right now in Littleton on in my street basically. So I've just had solar installed.
Maybe it's your fault. But...
Oh, yeah, no, right. So we all want to install solar, right? Then why shouldn't I be able to install solar just because I'm a year behind everyone else? It seems right that if you have roof space and you want to put solar on and enjoy the benefits, that you shouldn't be refused access to do that just because the grid operator or Ryan says, oh no, our network's overwhelmed on your street. So every street basically has a common transformer that everything feeds on. And the way I think about it is it's like our blood vessels. There's main arteries leading out and then much smaller blood vessels going out to our extremities. And what we're sort of proposing here is installing blood supply at the ends of our fingers and expecting it to be able to cope if all of those fingers are filled up with blood supply. And it's the same with energy. And this came out where I said I would like to connect my solar system to the grid, and I would like it to be this size. And they said, oh, no, we must limit you because if everyone in your street who has solar all generates power at the same time, which you will do if you're all in the same sunny spot, then you're gonna overwhelm our transformer. And what actually happens is the voltage rises. And we can't have the voltage rise. It has to be in this very narrow bound. Otherwise, we'll have a catastrophe on our hands. It'll be damaged homes.
So does that mean that there are places in Littleton where you can't?
Potentially.
Yeah, that,
And
have
then
they identified those?
there's-
Have they met?
that's a good question. Orion will do a very quick study for you if you apply. They'll look at the system, but it's why they apply a very blanket rule that's not very smart. At the moment they say 5 kilowatts is all that you can have exporting to the grid. Now there's a rule change that's come in that's added this nationally is allowing that to go to 10 kilowatts if your local network can take it. And so they need to apply engineers, they need to think about it, they need to study it. Imagine doing that for everyone who is applying to put solar on. It would be great if there was public information where you could look that up. I would love to see that. Lots of public information about the capacities and capabilities of our network. If that was public, we could do so many cool things in our community. But it's not public. You sort of have to apply and pay a fee, and then they say,
What are the fees?
$100, might be a bit more
We're
than that.
about to get solar on our roof,
Yeah.
and I have not encountered this before, so.
Look, I think
have
the
information
I
about
think it
it.
depends.
Below
Yeah,
five.
Mhm.
If you're below 5, they won't.
Yeah, they'll allow you to go and install 5 kilowatts. But they won't allow you to go bigger than that without studying the system. But 5 kilowatts is very small these days, relatively speaking. And I think the key takeaway here is that it's kind of a dumb rule without looking at the situation. Your network may well take way more than that, but as more people do it, everyone needs to kind of adjust, just like cars on the road. If we all go out driving at the same time, there's going to be a traffic.
Out there in the bottom.
I don't know the answer, but we could walk around. There's probably I don't know, 5 or 10. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Does installing, if you plan to install batteries at the same time, does that sort of
Yeah.
divert you from that?
It can do. They might put limits on what your system can still export, but they might allow you to put a bigger array on. But some of the rules are pretty sort of archaic. Like if you want to put in a big system, a big solar system, they'll still limit you on how much you can export, even if you've got a battery. Yeah.
So I have a follow-up question on that one, which is, I understand from a few things I've read that individual households having batteries is far less efficient than having community storage.
Yeah.
And I understand that's big in Australia.
Yep.
Because people have different profiles, so it balances out.
Yeah.
So getting back to the transformer issue, would it, conceptually, is it possible that having community batteries could manage the load in terms of the pushing back and therefore limit the possibility of damage on transformers?
Yep.
And what would it take to get that to happen?
Yeah, look, I think what needs to happen, there needs to be a lot of trust,
Okay.
and there needs to be some technical solutions. So Orion, they need to trust that you're all not going to export with your batteries all at the same time when there's no load. So it's all about what's happening in real time, and is everyone cooking dinner or not? And so that's where that sort of public information comes in. So the way I see this working is, and I think we're sort of developing relationships where this can take place with Orion, where we install a community battery and we invite them to engage with us on what use and what protocol that they might have with that battery. They might want to co-invest in that battery, and we might have an agreement on how that battery works, how they employ that battery for their purposes. But maybe 5 days of the year they might need it. And so that's relatively new. That's something Lex would like to be at the forefront of, is developing that relationship and that model of community energy assets, whether it's batteries or whatever it might be, and coordinating it with those who are trying to keep our grid stable. Yeah.
Oh, good person.
I love that idea of, I understand how we have to overbuild for the peaks, but I love the idea of, yeah, okay, we'll have this for the peaks, but on the 355 other days of the year, we can use this otherwise unused resource, in the community. I like that.
Yeah. And because the security of supply is really important. People get really upset and the economy suffers if the grid goes down. But it's
So
like,
we have to overbuild.
yeah, you have to overbuild, and that comes with excess and waste. And if we want it to be an affordable overbuild for everybody in the transition, an equitable transition, I think we need to work on ways, put our minds to making use of that. And batteries is one way, but I don't think it's the whole solution.
But making use of the other, 340 days of the year would be great.
Absolutely.
If something happens and the grid goes down, so those pylons go down, would Littleton be able to be self-sufficient in some way?
And that will take a lot. I think one day we might like to get there. It depends to what level you're talking about self-sufficient. I think if you wanted to make sure, ensure that Littleton sort of didn't know that this had happened, that would be an extraordinarily expensive, costly exercise for a very unlikely event. Yeah.
Basic human survival.
Yeah.
Through heat and heat,
Yep.
and as a community centre.
Yeah. So this project,
Have resiliency
this
project.
project here is really trying to be our first step towards realizing that. where this is already an emergency hub. It's not, is it, civil defence?
No, it's a community emergency.
Yeah, it's not civil defence anymore, but there is a,
It's run by Littleton people, for Littleton people.
yeah,
How Littleton people want it run. So we don't have to, talk to civil defence about it. It's whatever our needs are.
and so I think it makes sense from Lett's point of view to help provide an energy solution for what you're talking about, some resilience for the community, to be able to communicate to that side world, and for people to get help, come and have a hot drink, and charge their devices, whatever makes them feel comfortable in an event. But that doesn't have to be the end of it. You can roll these out, the sort of model out to more community buildings. There are a lot of community buildings that would be suitable for this. And there's sort of other applications too. One that I've been looking at is Naval Point Yacht Club. They have a dirty old diesel tractor that they used to haul out. And one idea we've been kicking over is if we were to convert that to electric or some sort of electric vehicle that did the hauling out, most of the time that tractor's just sitting in a shed. That's when that could be an asset on the grid, a battery providing support for the grid and resilience if there was an event. So it's thinking about where a battery can play another role when there's not an emergency. And I think resilience for your home, if you're thinking about solar and batteries, is a tricky one because there's no way you can value that from a cost payback perspective. It's how much do you value having the lights on and your fridge running? Or do you definitely want your TV to run and your heat pump? So those things all escalate up in terms of cost for the size of the system that you want to put in. But you can get definitely you can get basic resilience for your home first, but community as well, because we can't expect everybody to be able to install these in their homes. It's as Jeremy said, it's actually not the most efficient way to sort of achieve these outcomes as a community. Yeah.
The heat, because it's an interesting one, and it's not one I've thought about, so I'm very keen to hear about what happens in summer when you don't want the heat.
Yeah.
So right now, the heat just goes into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
right? And so you obviously need a way to direct that away from where you were sending it in the winter, or even when you've overheated the room. So you can turn the machine off, you can dial it down, you can direct the heat out. I just had a chance meeting with another founder of a company in New Zealand using harakeke to basically the materials from it to develop all sorts of really interesting constructions of materials. And they need to dry their harakeke. And so if we have a resource, whether it's solar energy or heat, often we can find and attract a use for that, an industry, something contributing to our community. So it might be that heat is used for something else. Yeah.
Years
Heating
ago,
water.
when I was doing geology, this is when I was at uni Canterbury in the 90s. We had a guest lecturer who talked about storing heat in aquifers and geological storage.
Oh.
Yeah. I haven't seen aquifer storage. I do know that believe the bus interchange in Christchurch that uses aquifer sourced heat pump circulation to cool and heat the building, which is super efficient. It's really just like a heat pump here, but instead of using the energy from the air outside, I've seen some really interesting case studies of sort of a DIY project, but installing insulation under the topsoil of the land around their house,
Yeah.
and then actually just pumping heat into the earth. And
Mhm.
you can actually store seasonal heat. So store the heat in the summer and then extract it back out with a heat pump in the winter.
Wow.
Now, that's mind bending, and like, if we all were to do that, I think there would be challenges and problems in the cost, but
Like little volcanoes.
yeah, no, absolutely, but you know, if you sort of suggest that, you know, I imagine that's one of the things we are, surely that will be.
Good sand as well.
Sand is a really great heat source. Yeah, so some people are putting sand into big containers and usually sinking them in the ground.
Yeah.
And sand can be heated up really high. There's also other materials as well, but sand's just really cheap.
Yeah.
And I think you want to insulate that really well. It depends what kind of problem that you're trying to solve. Absolutely, if you're trying to solve a intraday sort of heat problem, mostly in New Zealand we want sort of heating in the evenings
Yeah.
when we're home, and seasonally it's in the winter, obviously.
No more questions, so I wanted to wait until the end, because I have a question for you. I saw you at the Flex Forum, and Sam, there was a lot of companies who are trying to monetize this flexibility. So there was like a list of companies, and I wonder if you can speak to, of course, we want companies and entrepreneurs and energy entrepreneurs, but what role will they play? Like, will they make more expensive flexibility? Because I assume they have the smart systems who are kind of measuring and aggregating and then sending it to retailers and to the network. And I mean, maybe that's good, but would that not be more expensive?
Yeah, no.
What's your take on those?
I think what those companies doing, what Margaret is describing is companies that are trying to bring flexibility as a service,
Mhm.
right? And it's a little bit obtuse because it's not really meant for the end consumer. But it sort of would enable and automate and package up for us as consumers participating in that spot market, for example. So using electricity when it happens to be really cheap,
Mm.
or or turning things off when it's really expensive, so that on average we get some really cheap electricity, but we're also helping the grid balance out as well. And what I like to sort of emphasize is, don't think about that short-term state of that people turning things on and off. What's going to happen over time as more and more people start doing this on the grid? What will happen in general to the grid? You're going to end up with a really stabilized, flatter price than this really crazy seesaw price that we see. And I think that has a lot of benefits. One of the goals that I have with my company is that we will achieve that at scale because we're building megawatts of flexibility. But these companies that you're mentioning, they're trying to aggregate all of us in a similar way to what I'm describing here, but really turning it into a commercial product. We're aggregating all of us so that we can have an impact.
And
and an
impact
effect. And so they might contract the services out to Orion, and Orion says, awesome, we don't need to build as many substations or upgrade things because we can manage it now that more people are participating. So I think this is a really good thing, these flexibility operators, and I think they can't do this unless it's going to be cheaper and better for us. No one is going to pay more for flexibility, right? So
No value.
if it doesn't work, there's no business model. If the end consumer doesn't get a better deal, I don't think you're going to see any success. But what I would like to see is the energy markets valuing flexibility, because there's not really any mature markets in New Zealand for paying you to turn off. At the moment, you get the benefit of avoiding expensive energy. That's a benefit, but no one is really being paid to turn off. Like Tiwai Point is being paid to turn off because they are forfeiting a whole lot of revenue when they turn off. So I would like to see a mature demand response market in New Zealand that incentivized us or these flexibility companies that can help us flex.
I think we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
I hope you're all inspired by Shane's talk, and I know being a Littleton resident, I'm really excited about what we might be able to achieve here. Because yeah, Littleton, within the boundaries, and so he's hoping that we get there, and we're making a good start with the projects that we've got on the board so far. So just a small gift for you, Sam, to say thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we've got supper next. Juliet will get all that ready for you. And if anyone's interested, our next event is on May the 6th. And it's in here again. We've got a energy movie night called We the Power. Is that? Oh no, We the People, I think. So yeah, you're more than welcome to come along to that. Thank you.